Okay. So, hi everybody. It's day 29. I can't believe it's day 29. We've been at this for so long, and I can't believe that we have Ernesto Cisneros with us today. Somebody that I was kind of fangirling on Twitter, and you were kind enough to respond to me because I read your incredible book, Efrén Divided, and said, Kelly, you've got to read this. There are two things that I most wanted to talk to you about. Number one, my huge admiration that as a current classroom teacher, you've managed to write an incredible novel. There's something about being able to write while you're teaching and then write for who you teach that I think is the mark of someone who's just got such a beautiful heart for kids. So I am grateful to have a chance to talk to you, and welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. I mean, thank you for the kind words. Really appreciate that.
I can't believe we've never met when we teach, like taught and live 5 miles apart.
Actually, I think I did get to hear you speak at a conference a long time ago. But you were surrounded by paparazzi, all the teachers forming a paparazzi around you, so I couldn't really get to say hi.
Can we start over now and edit that out?
Yeah, I will edit that out.
So Ernesto, talk to us a little bit. How do you, first of all, what do you teach and where do you teach?
So I teach language arts, 8th grade, at Adventist Fundamental in Santa Ana, which is actually an interesting location because a long time ago, that's actually where I learned how to drive a bike. It's the same spot where I learned how to drive a car back when it used to be a parking lot. So I feel like I've always been at home being at that school.
And for those of you who are unaware, Santa Ana is in Southern California, just a little bit south of Los Angeles. So how did this book get born?
So this book was born from being a teacher and teaching creative writing, and we were doing a lot of peer editing and critiquing each other. And I started writing stories with the students because I wanted them to see how I too would struggle writing these stories. And I wanted, it's kind of like if you're a PE coach, you want to run with the kids. You don't just tell them go run 5 miles. No, you should be right there side by side, encouraging them and motivating them. And so I was doing that, and the students kept telling me, these are really good. You really should publish them. And so a long time ago, we embarked on a journey with all my different classes, and I just started saying, okay, let me see if I can publish this. So I joined the SCBWI, and I learned a lot about the process and what it takes. And 14 years of that, nothing was happening. But 2016 came along, and there was the elections were happening, and there was a lot of really negative things being said about the Latino community, and my students were a little scared, and they didn't know how to, what to think. And I knew that growing up, I always internalized everything that I heard, and I believed all those things. And so I didn't want my students to do that. So I decided, you know what, for the class, I'm going to go ahead and write this book. And I was thinking I was going to just print them out or give them to them in a PDF, and just again part of the writing workshops that we did. And my kids were helping me with it and critiquing me, telling me, no, nobody uses those words anymore. And telling me, no, this chapter's boring. They're very honest. And by the time I finished, they all thought it was amazing. And they said, no, you got to send this over. Towards the latter part of those 14 years, I was lucky enough to land an agent. And so I was actually kind of apologetic when I submitted to her because we had been unable to sell any of my work. And so I remember kind of handing the manuscript over and going like, I'm sorry, I was supposed to be working on something you could sell. And instead I wrote this story about an immigrant family, which I know, look what's going on right now. I'm sorry, I should have done better. And she loved it. And 2 weeks later, we had an offer from HarperCollins. Wow, right?
So a 14-year overnight success.
Yes, exactly.
And you got to go back into your 8th grade class and tell them that you had a contract with HarperCollins. What was that like?
Well, you can ask my brand new principal. I think it was the second day, or maybe the first week. I'm not sure. I know he was really, really new, and I actually hugged him when I found out. So,
So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if, you know, the topic, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, but it's about a family that faces a major crisis, right?
mhm.
I'm wondering, you know, because what happens to Efrén in the book has happened to my students in Anaheim. The
Yes.
exact same incident, the exact same repercussions of that. What did you have a particular student that inspired the story?
In 2016, I actually had 3 students, and I keep telling people these are 3 students that came to me and actually let me know that they had a parent taken away mid-year. I'm sure there was a lot more who just didn't feel, you know, that they were able to confide in me with that information. But there was one boy in particular who he sent me a little note saying, "Can we talk after school?" And I said, "Sure, stop by." He stops by. He tells me that over the weekend his father had been taken away, and I was a little devastated by it, and I was really upset with myself for not having. I didn't have the right answer. I mean, it's like, what do you say to a child going through this? So while I was writing the book, I always kept that in the back of my mind that I wanted to help kids who were experiencing this navigate through, you know, through these hard, difficult times. So like in the book, Efrén feels that he doesn't have anybody to turn to, and he takes on the entire burden of all the burden on himself. And what the biggest message I wanted to show kids is that you guys do have a community of supporters out there. There are people who care. There are people you can turn to for help, and you don't have to carry the burden by yourself.
Oh, you do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
he kind of starts with a cranky teacher who turns out to be a very helpful teacher.
Mr. Garrett, yes.
I've had the exact same conversation with students, and I have the exact same response. Like, what do you say? You know, and you know, you just try to be present in the kid's life and try to be loving in the kid's life, and so it really did bring that back for me.
You know what's fascinating though, Kelly, is that all teachers try to comfort kids in trouble. And what you've done is you've created something that can comfort thousands of kids in trouble. It's not dependent on you. You know how if we are helping kids get through something, it helps that kid because we're that teacher. But now you've got a book that can go into the hands of all of these kids. And you know that the crisis hasn't changed. There's still kids losing their family members.
Yes. There's over 15,000 children that were coming on their own that are right now are in the detention centers. So I've been watching really closely and seeing what's going on there too, just because, you know, I want to make sure that I stay informed and that they're treated humanely. But you know what, that was something I never expected. I mean, I know that a lot of teachers are using them not only in their classroom, but they're giving it to other teachers to remind them. And I'm so glad that you held my book upside down the way you did,
Yeah,
because
I love this.
yes, and I always remind people that sometimes we see students like the regular way, and we think one way of them, and then if we really take the time to get to know the kids, we find out there's things going on at home. I had a student who just wasn't doing any work and was misbehaving and was giving me a hard time. And I reflected back on the book, and I always keep a copy upside down by my desk. And I was thinking, okay, I'm not getting along with this kid. Let me take a moment. Let me talk to him. And I found out that his mom had passed away about 1.5 years ago. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, if that happened to me, I would be such a mess. I probably wouldn't go to work that year. And I can't imagine that this kid is able to show up to school and smile and just, I don't know, it was amazing. So I after that conversation, I had a whole new respect for the child. And so that's something that I love that Efrén is doing for some teachers right now.
Yeah.
So in all this time, like in writing and sharing the stories and eventually getting published, the writing that you started a long time ago, was it on the same theme or idea, or did your writing evolve into that topic, the deportation?
No. I've written lots of different stories and Latino stories too, but for some reason they weren't resonating with people. At least that's what I was being told. I'm not sure. That's a whole other discussion. I'm not sure if when people are saying I'm not identifying with the character because they're Latino, and the industry just doesn't really, I think we're like 5% of the industry, even though we make up 20% of the population. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it is my responsibility to make everybody, connect with, identify with the character when it's somebody who comes from a different background. So I'm not sure, but with that, for some reason, he did resonate with everybody. And I think it's because honestly, I wasn't writing it to try to be published. I was writing it to share it with my students. So my mom's in the story. I mean, some of the characters are loosely based on people. Mr. Garrett's a teacher from my school. This is the covers based on the cover of the school, Pio Pico Elementary in Santa Ana. Highland Street's a real street. You can actually take the book, walk around Highland Street, and kind of like, oh yes, there's that. He mentions this. Oh yeah, there's the tree that he mentioned in the story. So, for some reason, it just really connected with people.
What a wonderful thing for the kids in your class to have this like thing that's a tribute to where they're from and what they've experienced. Do you know, I heard about your book because I went to that Bard College Festival of Latinx Writers.
Okay.
So I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't necessarily get the attention or is on the radar of so many people. And that's all the more reason that we want it out in the world to be read. And, we have quite a population of Latinx kids at my college, and they've started an allies group and an affinity group for themselves. And we had the hardest time getting it through the approval process. It just kept getting lost in this. I'm the advisor, and they of course are taking it through the process. And the last step is to get permission to be all housed together, which is powerful for kids. I mean, they come from all over, and yet they would have a home. And that last step got lost in COVID, this just like the craziness of campus this spring. And so they can't live together in the fall. And I was just thinking about how I had, several of us were on the call, people in my group, that Bard Festival, we were all on it. So they could experience all of this rich literature and listen to all of you about what you're doing. And I think that it's not only 20% of our population, but if you think of the amount of policy and political stuff that's happening related to a population that doesn't get represented very well, that's a pretty powerful thing that you're a part of. I don't know, giving voice to a whole generation of kids.
Yeah, and again, it all stemmed from just wanting to share a story with the kids in my classroom. That's the fascinating part about it.
So Ernesto, I know you did some writing actually alongside the kids, like literally, but I'm curious, how do you balance teaching full time with trying to write a book? Like, what do you create in the morning? Do you wait till after school? How does that work?
It's not easy. I'll tell you that. With Efrén, was actually everything just kind of aligned perfectly because my son needed me to pick him up at 6 p.m. from school this particular year. And so I was like, the bell would ring and I would do my lesson plans real quickly. And then I would look up at the clock and I'm like, I've got 2 hours before I have to pick up my son. And then I would draft. I always carried paper with me. So if I did write a paragraph, I would carry it with me. And during nutrition, I would take notes. During lunch, I would take notes. And again, at the end of the day, those 2 hours I would write. And it took me about 6 months to pen the book, 2 to revise. And that's not the norm. That's the exception. My last book just took about 1.5 years. And that's because teaching during the pandemic has been, oh my goodness, so much more work. Before, something that would be a simple presentation is now you have to transfer everything onto PowerPoints or Google Slides, and you have to create it all. It's so much more time consuming. So my second book took probably at least, geez, I want to say a little bit over 1.5 years to write. And so it's not easy. It's just a matter of balancing my time and just and knowing that part of the writing process is also going for a walk. It's also doing things, recreational things, and that's part of the writing process. And now that I've kind of accepted that, I take the pressure off, and it's got to be fun. If you're not enjoying it, it's not going to be any good. At least that's just the way I see it.
So tell me what happens when you win this major award, the Pura Belpré Award? What happens to you as an author and to the book? It now has
Uh,
lovely gold stickers.
the best thing that happened to me was just hearing that I wasn't there when it happened, but my sister told me that my mom turned to my dad and she told him, "See, it was worth the sacrifices, um, the sacrifice," and that was something that meant a lot to me because the award was very affirming to my family for everything that they, I mean, my parents left when they were really young. They were still technically teenagers, and to leave to a country just to change the projection of your family, that's huge. And all of us went to college. My mom has a wall of college degrees, and when we got our college degrees, she took them. And it was just funny because she said, "I worked really hard for these," and we couldn't argue. And we're like, "What? Yes, you're right. Here you go." And so she has all of her college degrees at home. So she's got multiple college degrees.
So initially, when you said there was a lot of sacrifice involved, I thought initially you meant you in working so hard, but what you meant is the pathway that your parents paved in front of you guys.
Exactly. To me, that's the biggest honor, that this bestows. But it's just strange because, like I said earlier, 14 years ago, I wasn't receiving anything back when I queried publishers, and now people are contacting me. I got to be in the LA Times, the Orange County Register. I got to be the voice of OC. I got to be in a whole bunch of other places, and it's just it's kind of surreal. I never saw it coming. I never could have expected it. So it's strange. It's kind of strange.
How many students do you teach?
For language arts, it's about 120 a year.
They have had an opportunity to see what this means to write creatively next to someone who's taking it really seriously. And I just wonder if you could name for us things that you learned about teaching writing from doing this writing.
Well, I've learned a couple of things over the years as far as teaching writing. And the first thing is that I no longer, I don't prepare like pre-written work for them for like demoing. I let them see me struggle. And so when we're doing grammar lessons, and I'm like, okay, we're going to go ahead and conjugate this, or I'm going to come up with a sentence that contains, these elements. And they'll watch me try and form sentences. And sometimes it is horrible. And I struggle. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was really bad. Can somebody help me out here? And then the students will go, Mr. C, you forgot this. Mr. C, there's a comma there. And, that's the best part where they get to see all the mistakes. Before, if I was going to show something or demonstrate, I would write something the night before, and I would, do my grammar checker and spell check and everything, and make sure it was perfect. Come back to it, revisit it in the morning, because I didn't want to have any mistakes. But I think people become intimidated when everything's too clean. So that's the first thing. I think that's the best thing I've ever learned as a teacher. Let the kids see how messy it is, and also I want them to see my first drafts. And I tell them that writing is like a painting, and you first, you might paint. I've seen some illustrators, and they paint the whole canvas one color first, and you're like, that's kind of weird. I'm not sure what that's going to be. And then they do something else, they put in a second layer, and you're still like, not sure what that's going to be. But by the time they finish, it's amazing. And that's kind of the right way I look at writing too. And it takes different layers and layers and just different visits. And so I love that they will give me back a paper, and it's all marked up in red, and they're like, Mr. C, this is horrible. This is really, really bad. And I'm like, thank you. Or how would you fix it? And having the conversation with the students, that's the best part. And then at the end of the year, watching them write their own stories. And I've had students who have written up to, I believe my record is 77 pages for a short story assignment. Yeah, and I still, to this very day, I've told them, it doesn't matter if you were with me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I'm always there to look at your work. So I get to correct college papers periodically from former students. I have students who do want to be writers, and they send me their short stories, and I get to critique them, and that's just a pleasure. I don't mind doing that. It's an honor. I mean, it's just the fact that you had an influence on somebody is amazing.
That's why we all became teachers, right?
For sure, for sure.
All of what you just said, though, is really ground. I mean, I'm going to state Captain Obvious here, but it's grounded in the idea that you were doing the writing with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not assigning the writing, you're doing the writing, and you're revealing the wrestling match, which is so important. So, not to put the pressure on, well, what's next?
I have another book coming out, and right now I'm mostly just focusing on middle grade. So I have another book called Falling Short, and it's going to be coming in March of 2022.
Good for you.
And I did want something a little bit earlier. However, like I said, during the pandemic with teaching, it was just funny because my world was turned around as a teacher. Being a teacher of 25 years, I found myself turning to the new teachers because they're the ones who knew all the technology much better than I did. And they were showing me all the new apps and the new things that, that I needed to learn in order to do this now. But yeah, that's a book. It's about two boys who are, who don't feel like they're good enough as they are. And so they kind of turn to each other to become the better versions of themselves. And they think that if they do become, if one of them thinks that if he becomes more athletic, he's going to be able to connect better with his father, who was a jock in high school. And the other one thinks that his parents will stop fighting if he becomes a little bit more scholarly. And so they kind of switch lives and trying to help each other. And it's actually a very, it's heartwarming, but it's very humorous. I definitely wanted to, I think I made enough people cry with Efrén Divided. I wanted to make sure that I made people laugh for this book.
Very good.
Plus, I think I write too, because it was very emotionally draining to write this book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And without giving it away, I'm just going to say I love the ending. I love the ending of this book.
I did too. And
so powerful.
You just, any teacher watching who hasn't read this or bought it for their classroom, I think it's essential. It's a way for a kid to be seen, because even if your parent has not been taken, forcibly and deported, kids have lost parents. Every class we teach, we've got kids who've experienced loss and confusion and having to do more and take care of the family. And I just think you've captured so much the heart of a kid who's trying to do the right thing. School becomes an afterthought, and how sensitive we need to be as we go back to school this fall, even those going back right now, that there are kids who have had immeasurable losses over this crisis and will be in our rooms not telling us, and how critically important it is that we find ways to help them tell their stories.
Yes, and it's really important for these kids to see themselves. There's a term that I like to use a lot. It's called disentitlement, which is just the opposite. And I wasn't ever sure if it was a real word or not. I've seen it a few times being used now, so I think it's becoming a word. But it's something that I like to use to describe how I grew up. And I'd like teachers to be aware of it, just because, when we tell our kids, you could be doctors, you could be lawyers. I know as a product of Santa Ana, I never believed any of that. I grew up as a person of service. My whole family, we cleaned homes, we fixed cars, we cut grass. And so that's all I ever saw in my future. So when people said this to me, it never really clicked in my mind that I could do more. So I think it's really important that kids see themselves. And my favorite thing that has come, when you asked me the question before about the medal, it's having a conversation. And I got to have a book club with some of the actual kids from Santa Ana. And that was just a dream, to have the kids be able to see, there's your school right here in the book. Here's here's Don Tapatio, he has a food truck. And they're like, oh yes, we know the food truck right there. We know what you're talking about. They had seen themselves in a way that I never did growing up. And so to me, that's been the most amazing part of this experience.
You are
well, that's fantastic. And we are so happy that you agreed to give up your writing time of the day, since we're recording this in the early evening. But for you to come on and hang out with us for half an hour has really been a treat, Ernesto.
Oh, thank you guys so much for extending the invitation. Thank you.
Oh, and you're going to be with the Book Club Foundation this summer, helping us with our summer book club. It's a thrill to meet you. Thank you so much. I hope that you have great success, all your books in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very kind.
And when it's safe, I'm going to make that treacherous 5-mile drive and come see you.
Yes,
Absolutely.
my classroom is always open. Yes, yes.
Okay.
You know what? He'll bring article of the week to your students. They do it every week anyway, so now you'll have the article of the week.
I'll hand deliver it.
Goodbye.
Okay, thanks again.